Started here today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon. I want to give our welcome to the webinar series on e-commerce and fraud. My name is Matthew Abdullah, and I'm one of the marketing managers here at LimeLight. Today is part 3 in our 6-part series, and we will be talking about tackling checkout abandonment. I'm joined by 2 guests today. The first is Adam Pivko. He's the Director of Client Management and Anti-Fraud here at LimeLight. Adam has been working with Kount, managing merchants' anti-fraud portfolios for over 6 years, ranging from massive telecoms to travel sites, all the way through trial and subscription model clients. He's found that although the trial subscription industry is plagued by high chargebacks, merchants do not have the time nor efficient expertise to run and maintain an anti-fraud campaign. Thus, LimeLight launched an in-house managed anti-fraud service for this exact reason. Adam manages LimeLight's entire portfolio of anti-fraud merchants, building custom rule sets to combat the fraud they encounter in their business. Our second guest is Ben Cornett. He's the partner marketing manager at Kount. Ben joined Kount in 2016, bringing 20 years of experience in business development and marketing to the SaaS and financial services space. Over the last several years, he's built strong partnerships, co-marketing in the anti-fraud space. Ben is also adjunct faculty at Brigham Young University, Idaho, where he teaches business to the next generation of marketers. So Ben, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, and we'll get the presentation started.
Oh, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the introduction. Adam, I think you're here with us too. Good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Well, again, we're grateful, for the ability to join LimeLight in this 6-part webinar series. And, today it's our hopes that we can talk about tackling checkout abandonment, a little bit about what that is, and hopefully answer some questions that you have collectively between myself here at Kount and, of course, Adam as the expert there at LimeLight. Initially, I just want to maybe talk a little bit about checkout abandonment and how it differs a little bit from shopping cart abandonment. As you take a look into tackling this issue in e-commerce, we have to understand the difference between those two. Shopping cart abandonment is really where the buyer is simply adding items to a shopping cart which they're interested in. They can change their mind or shop on other e-commerce sites, the same product or service, pretty easily online. Cart abandonment, on the other hand, is a little bit different. It's when the buyer is committed to making the purchase, but something in the process disrupted that buying experience. And some examples often be seen are maybe a payment type isn't offered, or there's some language barriers, some things we're going to talk about. So, really the idea today is to talk about specifically that checkout abandonment and some of the common causes. An example, I spent 15 years in Brazil, and just an example to that local market, because I know it so well, is when you go online to purchase something and you have a buyer that's in the Brazilian market, there's a specific payment type. It's called boleto bancário that allows a shopper to be able to pay at an ATM machine. And if you're an e-commerce merchant selling in the Brazilian market and you don't have that as a payment source or a payment type, you run into issues, other issues as language barriers and things like that. And Adam, I know we talked, briefly earlier before the session today. Maybe just highlight. It's my understanding that LimeLight's really built a solution that enables you to build a campaign that you can specifically target, regions and currencies that are local to that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right on point. In each campaign, we allow different currencies, different localizations, different geographies, all of which can be customized directly within the console.
Right. And then, obviously in the checkout process, some of the common abandonment causes come down to that friction in the experience. Maybe the form is complicated, having to enter data again. Maybe talk to us just really quick, Adam. I know in your shopping cart experience, you have an ability to store some information that help like upsell and adding on products in the experience.
Yeah, that's right on point again. So well versed in our product. I like it, Ben. When it comes to reducing that checkout friction, a lot of our clients are doing multiple step trials and upsells and straight sales throughout the checkout process. And what LimeLight really seeks to accomplish is minimizing the amount of times customers need to re-enter credit card information or other information in order to select multiple products at the time of checkout, really smoothing smoothing the client through that checkout process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And as a result of that, you get systems that are up, and I know your systems on that Amazon Web Services, and then of course Kount comes into play when you do process e-commerce transaction. We don't want it to be held up as a result of the rules that are put around that transaction to stop fraud. As a result of that, we've developed our own in-house technology that allows us to give that response in 250 to 300 milliseconds. And what that results in is less friction in the process. And that's really what we're talking about today, is how do we make the process of checking out a little bit streamlined and simplified. And I know I want to turn maybe over to Matt and the LimeLight team a little bit. You guys want to talk a little bit about how you guys specifically help merchants fight that abandonment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to chat a little bit about the product, and I think there's 5 key points here, key strengths that LimeLight has in helping merchants tackle checkout abandonment. And one is speed. The speed in which pages load to a consumer reduce the conversion time. So it increases, the number of sales, and it smooths out the sales process. A second piece is capturing partial leads. If a customer comes onto a merchant's website and fills out a partial web form, a merchant is able to get that partial information, and if there's a problem in the checkout process, they can follow up with the customer later to recover that sale. Another is flexible checkout API. In the following slide, I'll dive more into this, but what LimeLight allows merchants to do is build a sales funnel and a sales process any way they like. I'll talk more about landing pages, the shopping cart, and step 2 in the next slide. But what it does is it helps keeps customers focused. And keeping people's focus today is incredibly important. And when you're able to keep a customer moving through that sales funnel, it is incredibly important. So those are the 5 things that LimeLight does best to help tackle checkout abandonment. So if you take a look. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Both you and I, Matt, we're marketers at heart, so from a marketing perspective, that attention and being able to hold that attention is really critical. And when it comes to actually processing payment, I think it's even more so. It's nice that you guys have a system that enables merchants to be able to do that.
Absolutely. That's probably one of our strengths. And if you flip over here to the next slide, I just kind of have a simple sales funnel. And a lot of our merchants will use this simple checkout process basically to guide their customers through the sales process, where they start with a landing page or a product page where it educates the customer about their product, why they should buy it, etc. Then it moves them to a shopping cart where it collects their billing information, and this all again is done through the LimeLight checkout API. And once that information is collected in the shopping cart, then they move on to a second step, typically, which will be perhaps an upsell. So to give a great example, maybe a merchant selling beard oil, and that's their primary product page. Well, if they want to have a step 2, perhaps they're selling a beard comb or beard vitamins or something of that nature. So, that would be a great example of a step 2. Some merchants even put a step 3. But once you've collected that information in the shopping cart, it allows a merchant to go back and kind of recover a sale if they don't make it to checkout. But through this very simple guided checkout process, it allows, it increases the conversion rate for merchants because it reduces the amount of ADHD consumers feel when they are staring at a shopping cart with hundreds of products. These are very simple, focused, and concise.
Yeah, I think that's also powerful. It's kind of funny you mentioned that. I actually love the idea of your example with the beard oil. It's kind of fun. Little example, I've actually bought some beard oil in the past, so it's funny you use that.
Exactly, you're familiar.
No beard now, though, so I maybe have to grow that back in No Shave November. Anyway, well, it's kind of interesting, and that process, the whole idea is, how do we get the consumer through the process from, the product offering, the dollars that you've invested as a merchant, or e-commerce retailer to to the actual checkout page, and then making sure that they can proceed with the order. And your solution, and obviously with Kount in the background to protect against fraud, is really good. It's funny, a lot of questions that we get here at Kount is often is I don't have a problem with fraud, right? I don't have an issue that I need to be worried about. Maybe they're small e-commerce merchants or people that we work with, and I think that I just want to kind of highlight maybe some of the things that we see here at Kount, and then maybe Adam, you can pitch in there on the LimeLight side. We often see people coming to us and say, I don't have an issue, but at the same time, they're processing a large number of chargebacks. In fact, I know recently we talked to a merchant that had one single chargeback. Of course, they're luxury goods, but the one chargeback was $10,000. Just kind of it's the only chargeback they've ever had, but they still tell us, I don't have issues with fraud. And it's kind of hard to see how people do that. But there's just some numbers on this slide that, you can see that if you have return rates over a certain number, and they might differ in some of LimeLight's customer base, but, chargeback rates are above a certain percent. Those are definitely signs that you might have issues, and that's where LimeLight and Kount can come in and help out. Maybe Adam, you can talk a little bit specifically about your merchant base and what you guys see as some of those signs and symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very easy to identify the fact that a client would potentially have a fraud issue or are constantly combating the fraud themselves through various means, whether it be through contesting those chargebacks or doing what they can from a gateway processing level, whether it be through AVS or CVV checks on the credit cards themselves. But with the foundations that the fraud system offers our clients, it's incredible to understand a much more in-depth look as to where that fraud is actually coming from, whether it's really just these cardholders or compromised cards or intentional fraudsters. Clients don't have that level of insight without truly getting involved with a program and platform like the one LimeLight and Kount offer together. Diving into some of these, high affiliate turnover, huge problem in our space. We see affiliates coming on board, spamming, driving as much revenue as they possibly can, and heading right out the back door with all the money they just made. So keeping an eye on that consistently with in-depth reports from the Kount level or within the LimeLight platform is a great way to stay ahead of fraud or identify that you do have a fraud issue in that specific category. With regards to manual reviews, the model in which we're implementing this service with our clients is minimizing that as much as possible and trying to automate the system to decline bad transactions and accept good ones right off the bat without having that manual intervention required or key personnel required on the client side. So definitely something, if you're manually reviewing anywhere close to 10% or over 10% of your transactions right now, there's definitely some high advancements in the fraud, anti-fraud space that you could implement on your business to mitigate that cost to your company, your organization, that time, as well as the inaccuracy of that type of solution.
Sure. Yeah, and I know a little bit earlier, another nice thing I think you do, Adam, on your side with people using the LimeLight Kount platform is the ability to really kind of give them a set of rules initially to help merchants get going, and then maybe talk a little bit about how you fine-tune those and use that tool that you have. You're not just setting it and forgetting it, right?
Totally not. I'm very against the set it and forget it mentality of anti-fraud. I think it's a constantly changing landscape, and when it comes to implementing too many rules, I definitely think that there's a limit to that. But at the same time, there is a limit to too minimal or too small amount of rules. I think it's really important to cover all the different foundations and different tools and functions and pieces of technology and pieces of information that Kount's capturing on each transaction to really make a broad, wide-stroking coverage of and utilizing all that Kount has to offer in a very small, concise set of rules so that you're capable of monitoring those rules. And as I have ongoing check-in calls with clients and making sure that the rules are performing well or there's room for improvement, we're constantly tweaking and tightening or loosening those rules as we see fit to best monitor the business. Also, we're capable of using cool reports within Kount to identify trends or maybe new rules that need to be created for their specific client situations. So utilizing all that Kount has to offer in a concise set of rules is definitely the best approach and something that I try to offer all of my clients.
Yeah, that's greatly powerful. And it's interesting, just a couple more slides here maybe to share, Matt and Adam, is the heart of all this really is 28 patents here at Kount on some core technology enables LimeLight to be able to help their merchants control fraud. And just a couple parts of these, maybe to point out, obviously proxy piercing is a pretty popular term nowadays. A lot of our competitors that we find, they do proxy piercing, but they only go down 1 or 2 levels. At Kount, we actually go through a deep proxy piercing to find out if the transaction is legitimate from someone that's really trying to buy the product. Other parts of this is being able to do the cross-merchant linking, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really at the core of that is that persona technology. And essentially what a persona is, and I think it's important to understand this, is Kount takes when a transaction comes into our platform, we take a digital kind of a thumbprint, or if you will, of an individual, and all the transactions they've had across anything that's ever touched our network. And maybe Adam, you've been around Kount for a long time, used our platform for a lot of years. Maybe you have a different take on the persona and what that really means to your audience.
For me, I try to always explain persona. It's a new term that clients coming on with the anti-fraud system aren't always too familiar with. For me, I always try to explain it in a sense of order linking. It's the ability to connect transactions across the Kount network and really derive a whole bunch of information about those other transactions to the transaction the client is just seeing at the time of checkout. It's so hard without that depth of knowledge and that database of information to really ascertain whether or not this client is capable, or sorry, this customer is capable of having so many emails or so many devices and so on and so forth. I find the persona technology extremely reliable and a great indicator of a riskier transaction versus a clear-cut fraudster.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We can see this here on that slide. Is you have a transaction a merchant sees, and you can see that on the very far left. You've got a device, the credit card, email. When that transaction comes in, that's really all the merchant gets to see. And as a result of that persona that we've developed here at Kount, we have the ability to now say, okay, well, that credit card was also used with this other device. And you can see it goes on. This device was used in 3 other transactions with a different credit card, which is now expanded. And now, you can see that at that one persona, they've used 13 different credit cards, 19 different devices, and 26 different emails. So really, the value of using LimeLight Kount is you get the ability to expand your vision into really what's going on with that transaction. And you think that's pretty accurate summary there, Adam?
Yeah, it's these specific situations, like 13 cards, 19 different devices, 26 emails, where I say, hey, client, do you think this is fraud? And obviously every time they're like, yeah, great block, awesome system. So I really like seeing this persona technology. It really puts into perspective how capable and willing and determined some of these fraudsters are in testing credit card information or using credit card information to defraud our clients and others in the space.
Yeah, and I know in the previous webinar we talked about what you guys see is, I don't remember the number, it was 2 point sometimes the value of the transactions, what a chargeback cost, or what fraud actually cost. Maybe refresh our memory for those that haven't been on our webinar.
Yeah, the way LimeLight calculates chargeback cost is 2.2 times the transaction amount. So it's taking into consideration a whole bunch of different factors into that amount. But if you think about how many good transactions it takes you to recoup that, it's pretty significant once it's all said and done.
Right. And so, if you're looking at a merchant and all you have is a device information and that single device and no access to, the capabilities LimeLight and Kount offer, you run into some risk, and, you got to take that in consideration, that 2.2 times cost. I appreciate that, Adam. But, again, how do folks get a hold of, we got information on the screen. We're here to answer questions you might have, and I don't know if we've had any questions come in, Matt.
No questions so far, but if anybody has a question, they'd like to raise their hand in the webinar, if they'd like to send a chat message to any of us, we would love to answer a couple questions right now. We have
sure.
Not seen
and then I know that you've got a download available of a handout of these slides, I believe, and again, you've got our contact information here on the screen. I'm happy to help answer any questions. Of course, probably direct you mostly to Adam and Matt. But we're here to help support LimeLight, and we appreciate the opportunity to be together with you guys. And I'll hang on the line for any questions you might have.
Here's a question. What processes are involved in device fingerprinting?
I'll quickly touch on that. with regards to device fingerprinting, the technology itself is implemented by a pixel on the checkout page. It's relatively intuitive. LimeLight offers that scripting and code pretty straightforward and how to implement it, a full strategy to do so. But simple copy and paste, a little tweaking to customize to your business, and you're off to the races. Basically what's happening is that device fingerprint is capturing all that device information, directly sending it over to the Kount side of things. And then once the transaction information follows suit, we're pairing up those two pieces of information such that we're combining the device information with the transactional information, and then doing all the persona linking right then.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Adam. And maybe to add to that, we know that Kount actually originally started device fingerprinting back in 1999. And it's interesting, the device fingerprint, the original patent, Kount owns that original patent. And we do a little bit different than a lot of competition out there. A lot of competitors go down and they'll go into a device and they only go down maybe one or two items, 2 layers deep on the device. And so you get kind of a half a fingerprint. Whereas Kount, we actually go into a device specifically 6 layers deep. Pretty hard for a fraudster to catch all the settings they need to change to be able to change everything to not identify a device. And so it enables us with that snippet of code that's placed on that checkout page really to get a full fingerprint. And if you look at it from a crime scene, you'd probably rather have a full fingerprint than a half a fingerprint. And that's where we consider our device fingerprinting to really stand apart from any of the others.
Yeah, one more thing just about what the device fingerprint even captures. It's capturing so much information. It's capturing device location, IP, browser settings, time zone settings, language and device settings on the actual device. It's capturing Java, cookies, proxy piercing technology. It's all kind of embedded into one. It's a very powerful tool and really helps make each transaction assessment itself more accurate, which is where I see the most value in that system.
That's good.
I got another great question here, and that is, if a merchant is seeing some abandonment, they're getting submissions, but not conversions, how do they troubleshoot this problem?
I'd be happy to speak to a little bit about that. Obviously, I welcome whoever asked that question to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to do a more hands-on review. But first and foremost, reviewing your checkout process yourself is definitely a great place to start. If you're having challenges submitting information, or for example, if you're processing banks or gateways behind the scenes are declining too many transactions, that could also lead to drops in conversion. I'd be really interested to taking a look at that personally. If you want to reach out to me, my email's right on the screen. It's Adam talking right now, so feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect and do a quick review with you, see if I can offer any assistance or insight. But to each client, it's very different.
Yeah, that's a great question. Also, Adam, another question here. How long does it take for LimeLight to launch a Kount setup for their particular business?
Oh, so fast. Because our integration is direct with Kount, simply I like to do a Kount kickoff call with clients. I review the configurations that I'm recommending for the portfolio, making sure that the client understands that. From the time I receive an application to the time I have the account configured ready to go for a Kount kickoff call is typically like less than 24 hours or so. From that, once we go through the Kount kickoff call and make sure you understand all the rules and we get them to a configurable, ready to launch point of view, then it's just about the client implementing the pixel, and I see that done in under an hour, typically on one checkout page. So hypothetically speaking, 25 hours all in, all said and done. But yeah, it's really fast, really efficient. There's not much technical expertise required on the client side because LimeLight's taking care of that integration direct with Kount.
And obviously, we took that approach collectively. It's really important for us to make sure that the end user, the merchant, right, gets the biggest value without a lot of heavy lifting work.
That is incredibly fast. A 25-hour turnaround time to setting up an account. That is impressive. Are there any more questions before we end this week's webinar on checkout abandonment? We got 3 great ones so far, but we'll stick around for another couple seconds to see if any more questions come in, and then we'll end the webinar. Looks like I'm not seeing anything else, so we will end it. We will end it now. And Ben, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. This was incredibly informative, and I enjoyed listening to both of you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Maybe Matt, just a quick question. You know, how would someone that maybe watched a webinar and wants to share it with a coworker, how would they get access to that?
That is a great question. So there will be a follow-up email to this webinar that will have a link, a share link, that you can share this webinar with anybody who is interested in seeing it. You can also view these webinars in the LimeLight Resource Center. So we have parts 1, 2, and we will have part 3 in the LimeLight Resource Center, along with a bunch of other informational downloads. We have guest blog posts from you, Ben. We have guest posts from Adam about Kount, and all sorts of other anti-fraud topics. So definitely want to give a big shout out to our resource center here at LimeLight. So that is actually probably the best place to find any of these webinars, downloadables, any kind of content anybody's interested in. They will be able to get that from our LimeLight Resource Center.
Okay, appreciate it. Guys, I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Ben, and thank you, Adam. And remember, be sure to join us in 2 weeks for part 4 in our series. I don't have the topic in front of me right now, but we will have another excellent webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time, and you will be sure to get a couple reminder emails. If you have any questions, please direct them to Adam, Ben, or myself, particularly if you have questions that are, relevant specifically to your business that we can address personally. So again, thank you both for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.